Today we're going to talk about volume planning, production, and the supply chain, and how it impacts everything from customer satisfaction through to profitability for the OEM, the dealer, and also used car prices and depreciation. There's lots to it.
Let's jump into it.
With 30 years experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies and original equipment manufacturers. Please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
All right, now, because I was working some numbers to do the forecast, how forecasting works. Because I'm trying to work out how do we approach today's topic. Because really, it's about how do you end up in a situation with too much stock, and how is that going to affect new car pricing, used car pricing, and the market? Because really, that's what we need to show with evidence to say this is actually what happens. And the example I want to use is a nice simple one. Let's say you're a car company that's been selling 800 cars a month. At the start of the year, your head office turns to you and says, right, John, you've been doing a great job, but we now want to make more money and we need to have more market share. So you must increase your sales volume from 800 a month to 1,000 a month. So basically going from moving your business to be 12,000 units a year. Now, how you do that is usually done through a couple of different things. You've either got to have new product, have new production, have some more marketing to increase your share of voice, to then increase your share of the market, or you need to steal it from somebody else who's in decline. So you've then got to go in and chase that and conquest that business, or do fleet or some other business like that. So you put your plans together, you've got your marketing budget, you put your volume plan together. Now, say we've got to do 1,000 units a month. That means that when we look at our planning, we then reverse engineer the volume plan to equal that sales plan. So when we start with that 1,000 a month, you're selling 800 a month. What you need to have at the close of every month is 45-day stock, ideally on hand in the country. So that means you need to sell 1,000 and have 1,500 left over in readiness for the next month, because you've got another 1,000 arriving during the month to keep topping up the volumes. So that 1,000 on water, then there's 1,000 that's been built, already waiting to be put on water, and then there's 1,000 that's in production that you can't change because they're already being built, and there's another 1,000 in planning phase for the following month that you can't change either. So basically, for that 1 month that you've got already 2,500 cars here, because 1,000 are going to be sold. You've got to finish with 1,500. You've got 1,000 on water. You've got 1,000 waiting to be put on water, 1,000 in the factory, and 1,000 to be scheduled. So in essence, you've got 4,000 cars that you can't change anything about. Now, let's use the example that you're unsuccessful because competition is competition, and you still sell your 800 a month. So you still can status quo, you've been selling 800 a month and you sell 800 for the first month. In the volume plan, you're left now with 200 spare cars. Those cars get put back into the volume plan, so at some point in your volume plan, you're going to sell 1,200 cars, not 1,000 cars, because you have to make up for that 200. Say the next month comes around and you sell another 800. Suddenly, you're 400 units behind the 8 ball, and you've got stock building up here because instead of having 1,500 cars on grass, ready to go for the next month, you've actually got 1,900 cars. So you're already getting to the stage of having 2 months supply for your business. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because as you roll, at some point you have to come off the number unless you have a rectification to get those sales volumes up. So if your sales volume still maintains at 800 a month, you've got at least 5,000 cars coming your way before you come off the number. Now, no one's prepared to come off the number for the first quarter. What happens is the car company just back end those volumes into the volume plan. So you don't change the volume plan realistically until halfway through the year. You only can affect the last quarter of supply at that point. And that's when you start cancelling production to try to catch up because you've built all this extra inventory. And this is how you start with just one car company doing that. You multiply that across 6 or 7 car companies, and suddenly you start to get an oversupply situation. Now, this is a simple brand that's just doing 1,000 a month. Think of a brand that actually doing a lot greater volumes. And the longer your lead times from order to production to arrival, the less flexibility that you have in that supply chain. So it's worked the opposite. So we've had no stocks, therefore there's been nothing on grass, waiting for ships to arrive. We're at the mercy of the shipping, mercy of the stink bugs, mercy of what's happened as far as blockages in the Suez Canal. All these things have impacted us in the most recent times. But in a normal market, when everyone's got capacity, shipping's not a problem, and there is a chase for volume because no one likes the status quo. We all want to have more share. This is how inventory builds up. It is very basic, and it all comes down to what the edict is from the global head offices to drive the volumes up. And to drive the volumes, you don't just suddenly order now and turn it on and turn it off. It's a long lead time to turn stuff on and off. And that's a big difference for the markets that actually manufacture in their own countries or their own geographic areas. The luxury is you can actually idle a plant. So when you look at what happens in other countries where you've got a manufacturing, you can idle a plant or not build for your market, you can build for overseas markets. But when you're a niche country for a particular brand, they'll build your cars or vehicles at a certain time that suits the production capacity. But once you've ordered them, they're not going to cancel the components because they're already coming in. That was just a simple arithmetic, so you could go, all right, so then you're adding 200, so you get 1,500 goes to 1,700, goes to 1,900 cars in stock. Suddenly you're at 2,100 by month 3, and you're selling 800 a month. You've actually got 2.5 months supply. And then you start, but at some point you've got to come off your number. But at what point do you call it? Because if you call it too early, then what happens is, and this is where the volume plan and the achievement comes into play, where you have to protect the marketing money. As we learned early days with our interview with Carl Winther on marketing always being on, when the volume starts to dry up and you need to take volume out of the plan, the first thing that gets cut is the fixed marketing expense. So there is the cat and mouse of the sales volumes not being achieved. Now, it might be because not enough people are buying and you need to actually spend more in marketing. But what the overseas car company will do is they will actually cut the marketing budget, the fixed marketing budget. So it's actually this vicious cycle that takes effect. So if you're not achieving what the volume plan said, you'll have 3 months of advertising that you've got locked in. But as soon as you come off the number, as far as the total annual number, so you've only been doing 800 a month, instead of the 1,000 volume plan, because the marketing spend was based on you achieving 1,000. And usually the marketing money is never enough to do that anyway. But what the overseas head office does is pull your budget away from your marketing, which then means you've got to try to get the volume through other means. And how you do that is normally through doing dirty fleet deals or moving some volume so that you can get the volume back into the overall number and then get the fixed marketing money back. Because as soon as the head office feels that you're not going to achieve your total volume plan through the sales channel mix that you've anticipated at a certain profitability level, the first thing that happens is they cut your fixed marketing. So all your digital or your TV, any other outdoor you're doing gets cut, which then means you'll actually sell less vehicles, which means that it's a spiral of going down unless someone else suddenly can't supply and you win that battle. Or you've got an amazing new product that's just taking off and you don't need to advertise it. But we all know that's not in the normal world, especially now as we come out of COVID and we get a bit more normal from a supply catching up with demand. And now we're getting EVs coming into play and we're going to get supply of those. It gets back to, all right, so if we aren't getting our volume, we've got stock building up, then we either start discounting it or we do other things. But first thing we do is we stop advertising or cut it back at least.
I think the difficult thing, Mark, is to call it off because no one wants to hear you pull off volume because the factory would have ordered parts from suppliers to commit to that volume. So they would have all their suppliers geared up to be supplying those parts. If Australia doesn't take the volume, the parent company needs to try and move that volume to some other market. That's quite a big situation to them. If they've got 2 or 3 markets coming off volume, that factory has to produce those cars. They can't, if they committed for the year, they've got workers, they've got parts coming, they've got everything committed. They can't just wind back that volume very quickly. And especially being a right-hand drive country, it complicates it even more. If we were left-hand drive, they could move that volume to some other market a lot more easily than just, being a right-hand country.
And you're right, John. That's where right-hand drive is a big thing. If you don't have another right-hand drive market to move that to, it's a challenge. But even within that, certain countries, and let's use Australia as an example, the cars are homologated to a specific configuration that aren't necessarily the same in other countries. So there's extra homologation components that you need to forecast and order. Now, you may be building the cars 45 days out from when you actually need them to be assembled, but the planning for transmissions, components, for other electrical bits and pieces, those items programming for that production is often 6 months or more out, where you have to lock in to say, we're going to build this many cars of this configuration, and then we'll actually place the order for it a bit further down the track, but we've given already the factory the items that we need to already pre-order from a drivetrain and some of the other componentry to show that, yes, that the suppliers can have those ready. The final order really is what seat trims, what colours, and what other little options we're going to have. But some options need to be part of that longer term items planning process. So it is a very complex procedure to plan the volume and execute it. And often I know it meant many a dealer or customer say, well, why can't you just order the cars that we need? Well, that ordering had to be done with a crystal ball 6 to 8 months ago as to what was actually going to be ordered this month was already planned many, many moons ago. And this is where complexity is the enemy. The more model variants you have, the more options you have within those model variants, the harder it is to get that volume planning right. So that's why Henry Ford in his early days was very good, and that's why he got some quick traction. You can have any T model you like as long as it's black. So, and believe it or not, colour adds significant complexity to how many versions of a particular car you have. So colour is a challenge. With EVs, it won't necessarily be as big a challenge, but basically engines and different transmission configurations, that's another challenge. And then you have options of body style. And if you have different 2 doors and 3 doors or 3-door hatches versus 5 doors and all the other bits and pieces that come along with that, that adds lots of complexity. And then you have customization. Well, look out, you're waiting a long time, especially if your lead time's a long way away. And that gets back to the point I was raising before. Countries that have the assembly plant within their geographic boundaries, they can either idle the assembly plant if they get way ahead of capacity. They can take a week off, a day off, or a few days off to just control the supply. And that's what happens in most manufacturing countries. Italy was a classic for it. The US does it as well when there's excess supply. Let's just idle the plant. And let's drop it down to 3 days or 2 days so that you've got the plant working as efficiently as it can for the days it needs to, but also you dry up a bit of that inventory and you don't build up that stock. Because then you have the other problems that we talked about with seeds, etc., growing grass seeds contaminating the inventory as it gets shipped around the world because it's being held in a lot next to the assembly plant, and all sorts of contaminants affect the vehicles. That's how we end up with these situations of excess inventory.
Now, Mark, you've spoken about the impact on the distribution company and the manufacturer. What sort of impact will that have on the dealer? How does that flow through to the dealer? And how will it impact the dealer business?
Well, it impacts everyone. And this is where once again, I often talk about the unsung heroes in the car companies. I think the person who does the volume planning is often one of the most stressed people in the wholesale company, and often is blamed for all the things that go wrong. Whereas, when things are running smoothly, no one says, "Oh, what great job!" It's just a matter of we're getting target. So the challenge for the dealers is that you're getting stock that you don't necessarily want. All right, now you're getting anything that comes in and goes out. That's great. But the more complexity, the harder it is for the dealer to get the vehicles they need, or they've got to forward order them all the way. Now, this is where the other certain car companies say, well, you forward order we'll only build to your forward order. But when it's coming, whether it's rain, hail or shine, you're getting it. If the market slows, you're getting that stock. So the onus is then on the dealer to do that forward ordering and forecasting 3, 4, 5 months out, because the wholesale company is just going to basically order it, bring it in and invoice you straight away for it, because it's going to hit your floor plan. Now, it's been great when there's been no stock. Yeah, terrific, let's get it in. But when the dealers and the wholesale and the national sales company get it wrong, then you start to get a bit of pain with inventory, and then you need to start discounting and put incentives on those cars to move them.
Yeah, because before COVID, we saw a lot of dealers having impact on their financials. 30% of dealers weren't making money. Those that were making money were struggling to make any sort of decent return on sales. Do you think that will come back?
Well, two things, and we've had the conversation with a number of guest speakers over in a recent podcast, where the thing called floor plan is coming back as a consideration, whereas during COVID it disappeared. A, you had low interest rates, but B, you had no stocks, therefore you didn't pay any floor plan. But now the inventory is coming back. If you've ordered it, you're getting it, and you'll be paying high interest on vehicles that are now in your stock and not necessarily selling. So the shockwaves haven't hit yet. It's still some time away. Some brands will be starting to feel it a bit more than others, ones that are building up capacity. Others that can switch off and on the supply are in a lot better position. And as long as there's still demand for those products, there's that happiness of it going in and coming and going out. But definitely from a profitability perspective, inventory does hurt. It costs money to finance it, and usually it means you've got to start discounting it to clear it.
How will that impact used car prices, Mark?
Well, this is where once you get the supply new, and if demand remains the same for used, therefore you've got a reduction in price, because as soon as you start discounting the new car, the used car starts dropping down. People don't pay a premium for a used car if a new car is available and at a discounted price. That's the knock-on effect. People are paying for high prices for used cars because you couldn't get a new one. Even though the new one and used one were very close in price, well, no point waiting for 8 months to get a new car. I'll pay a premium for the used car because I can get it now. And that's why you're getting the higher prices, and still are on certain models getting very high prices for used cars. High prices traditionally versus what you're traditionally getting for those cars. There have always been winners and losers with used cars, where some have always been more desirable than others as used vehicles. It comes down to the uniqueness, the volume of them, and the predisposition for a used car buyer to pay a premium for that car. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the high volume cars are the premium used cars. And it doesn't mean that a high cost price, new car price, is a premium from a used perspective. It really comes down to the individual vehicles and the desirability and also the supply of those vehicles versus the subsequent demand for those vehicles. It really gets back to distribution, forecasting and sales volumes and the impacts of the knock-on effect of all that, because it really comes down to this whole idea that it is a volume plan that every car company puts together. No car company says, I think we'll tell us what you reckon you'll sell, and well, let's see how we go. There isn't a let's see how we go approach with automotive companies. They are managed and micromanaged to a millimetre of their lives. Everything from the marketing spend, the efficiency of the spend, the cost per click, the eyeballs it gets from a website perspective, the amount of brochure downloads, the amount of walk-ins, the amount of leads that are sent through, all of that comes down to marketing efficiency. And there's a number of measures around that. Purchase intention. Are we increasing our purchase intention? What's our conversion ratio on those leads as well? So you're looking at the high level funnel, and then the whole marketing funnel then moves down into the sales funnel. So what's actually happening in the dealerships? Are the people physically coming in? How many phone calls are we getting? How many test drives are we performing? And then what's our closing ratio when people do come? And then what's the pipeline for when they come in? Do they come in and buy today, or do they come in, test drive, and then buy in a week's time? These are the sort of things that are all measured with the efficiency of the funnel and also the efficiency of the marketing spend. Because fixed marketing is a huge outlay for any automotive car company. It's a big ticket item where they throw a lot of money to secure that share of voice and also to get the buyers to come in and buy their cars. So when you've had a situation of no supply, everyone stopped spending money on marketing because it didn't matter. You didn't need to spend money on marketing. But in a normal situation, on any given Sunday, watch how many car company ads are on and how many brands are advertising. There's usually one after the other, after the other, after the other, because they're trying to get a share of voice. And that's in a normal supply situation. We're now starting to see more and more car ads coming back in through traditional media. Digital's always been there, but it's even getting stronger. So the marketing spend, and the key here is, and this is what's funny, from a sales perspective, you feel for the sales directors of the world and the sales ops people. They have to stick to that volume plan for as long as possible, even if the sales aren't occurring. Because as soon as they flag it's coming off, A, they're in the gun sights as individuals, but B, the marketing money will be cut, which means the marketing directors then have to recut their budgets, work out where they're going to spend their money, and then try and get a reasonable return of their metrics in the upper funnel to show that they're still achieving what they need to, whilst the sales channel goes out and tries to push as much as they can. So that's when you start to move from being a pull to a push, and that's when you've got to do fleet deals, you've got to do throw incentives if you have the ability to put incentives on. And then the other option is that you just go through a push with the dealers as you need to get the registrations up. And that's when we see the situation of the demo game starts, because you need to have the registrations. Then you get a decline in used car prices, because the first discounting is that demonstrator. When it starts getting discounted because there's lots of them, that's a warning sign that you're going to get eroded margins, you're going to get eroded used car values, and you're getting a push strategy so that the brand is in survival to keep the volume going with the marketing money and achieve the volumes.
And how do you get more accurate forecasting, and how do you hold the different entities accountable? Because a factory, on the one hand, he needs to produce, say, 100,000 units in the year. So as long as he produces it, he might substitute different models, or he might delay some volume with other models that are easier to build, because he needs to achieve his target of producing 100,000 units. But that might impact the market. And so there might be all different types of things happening in the supply chain that there's very little way to control it. So is there a better way to be able to forecast what's happening at the coalface, and then holding everybody accountable that they're supplying to meet that forecast, and that the forecast is actually being delivered?
It's a very good question that you ask, because there's a whole heap of other things that come into play. The factory doesn't always build what it needs to build in the months that you need it to be built. There are silly things that happen, that someone doesn't supply something, or another market gets ahead of you from your production. Your build may needed to have been built in the first 2 weeks of the month, so it makes the ship in time to get on to the next transship port, etc., and then so it can meet the next boat, so you therefore get it in time. So all these things come into play and can cause problems for you. Hence, this is why the beauty of having a factory in your backyard in your own country is so much easier. You've got more control, and the lead times and the supply lines are a lot easier. And you can have a direct conversation with the factory to say, well, can you build more of this model or that model? That doesn't happen from a global perspective, especially if your production, let's get back to the 12,000 units a year. If you're a 12,000 unit market and the factory is producing 700 cars a day, you're not really relevant to that factory, given that you need to have the cars drip fed. They would love to build your cars in 1 month and send all of them to you in your annual production. There it is. And just that one ship done, let's not worry about anything anymore, or one production run, and that's it. But we know that's not how the world works. So this is where you will get missed supply, and you will get batch supply. Like if their factory's got excess capacity and they know you've got to have 1,000 a month, they might build 2,000 of your cars in 1 month and stand them to you early. That has happened, and I've actually experienced that firsthand. So you get the ebb and the flow. So it'll be, well, hang on, we've got extra capacity here. Let's build all the cars for Australia for the next 3 months, and let's get them done. So the KPIs of the factory are met, saying, yes, we built our X amount per month that we needed to. you've now got cars coming your way that you didn't need, or they're coming in a lot earlier than you needed them to be. That's the challenge that you're dealing with. And the other bit is forecasting. Yes, that forecasting won't stop the factory from doing that, because ultimately we always have to remember, why is the car company in business? Why is the factory in business? It's there to make money. It is there to be as efficient as possible from a manufacturing perspective. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you got as much out of the conversation as we did. It's a very interesting topic when you'll talk about forecasting, budgets, and volume planning. And it really impacts everything from production through to used car values. So it really is something to be very mindful and aware of.
Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. And thank you for watching.